The city breathes in uneven rhythms, a place where the past and present collide in ways that only those who have lived through injustice can understand. The streets are lined with memories, marches that shook the earth, voices that rose and were silenced, names that were once chanted but now only exist on faded murals. The courthouse stands like an unmovable fortress, its marble pillars towering over the people below. It has seen decades of rulings, but its foundations are built on something far older than law: power. Malcolm Carter drives through these streets, his grip tightening around the steering wheel. This is home, but it is also the place that tried to break him. He left, but he never really escaped. And now, he has returned, not as a boy running from its ghosts, but as a man ready to face them. The memories come unbidden. His mother's trembling hands as she clutched court documents, eyes hollow with grief after his father was sentenced for a crime he did not commit. The nights Malcolm sat awake, listening to her cry, vowing he would find a way to fight back. The whispers in school from teachers who told him, "Men like you don't make it in places like that." He had swallowed their doubts, turned them into fuel. He had worked twice as hard, climbed higher than they ever thought possible. And now he was here, a lawyer, a fighter, a man who had seen the system for what it was and had chosen to stand against it. A red and blue light flickers in his rearview mirror. His heartbeat remains steady as he pulls over to the side of the road. He watches in the mirror as two white officers step out of the patrol car, their movements slow, deliberate. One places a hand on his holster. The other approaches his window, tapping the glass with unnecessary force. "License and registration," the officer says, his voice clipped, mechanical. Malcolm meets his gaze, reading the challenge in his eyes. He moves slowly, keeping his hands visible, retrieving his wallet. "May I ask why I was stopped?" His voice is measured, devoid of fear, a smirk. "Step out of the vehicle." A weight settles in Malcolm's chest, but he does not argue. He knows how this plays out, knows that in their eyes, the simple act of questioning is resistance. He unbuckles his seatbelt and steps out. The officer grips his arm before he fully straightens, twisting it behind his back. "Resisting arrest," the other officer mutters. "I didn't resist," Malcolm says evenly. The sharp bite of metal around his wrists is a sensation that has been passed down like an inheritance. "You're under arrest," the officer says. "For what?" "For asking too many damn questions." They exchange knowing glances before shoving him toward the squad car. The same old game, the same old cycle. But this time, they have no idea who they're dealing with. The holding cell smells of sweat and stale air. Other men sit slumped against the walls, some staring blankly at the floor, others lost in quiet conversations. Malcolm takes a seat, his back straight, his expression unreadable. They expect anger, expect frustration, expect him to lash out. But he won't, not now. A man beside him, older, weary, lets out a low chuckle. "First time?" Malcolm glances at him. "Not exactly." The man nods knowingly. "Yeah, didn't think so." The morning comes too soon. A guard unlocks the cell, nodding for Malcolm to stand. He is led through the halls, past rows of desks where officers sip coffee and laugh as though this place isn't built on the suffering of others. He enters the courtroom, the chains around his wrists clinking with each step. Judge Lawrence Whitmore doesn't look up as Malcolm is brought before him. The man is old, gray-haired, but his eyes are sharp, assessing. Malcolm has read about him. A judge with a reputation for strict sentencing, a man who believes in law and order above all else. Whitmore sighs, rubbing his temple. "What's the charge?" "Resisting arrest," the officer replies. Whitmore barely glances at Malcolm before waving a dismissive hand. "Case dismissed. Another one wasting my time." Just like that. No questions, no interest, no justice. Malcolm clenches his fists, but his face remains impassive. He meets Whitmore's gaze as he turns to leave. The judge doesn't recognize him. Not yet. Outside the courthouse, Malcolm takes in a deep breath, letting the cool air settle inside him. The anger is there, simmering, controlled. He looks up at the imposing building, at the judge's chambers behind the high windows. A storm is coming, and they have no idea who they just dismissed. Malcolm Carter had known injustice long before he understood the law. It was written in the weary lines of his mother's face, in the silence that followed the word guilty, in the way his father's hands trembled when he was led out of the courtroom. He was only 10, but he remembered everything. The judge's cold stare, the way the public defender barely fought. His mother had screamed, pleaded, her voice cracking as she clutched at the air as if she could pull her husband back from the abyss. She had no money for appeals, no favors to call in. The system swallowed his father whole, and life moved on. Except for Malcolm. For him, that moment had settled into his bones, had hardened into something unshakable. The city did not make space for boys like Malcolm. His ambition was seen as arrogance, his intelligence a threat. Teachers shook their heads when he spoke of his dreams. "Boys like you don't become lawyers," one of them had said, not unkindly, but with the weight of certainty. But his mother had placed her hands on his shoulders, her grip firm. "If you don't fight for us, who will?" That was all it took. He studied when others slept. He turned taunts into motivation. He memorized cases, buried himself in law books. When the acceptance letter came, a scholarship to one of the best law schools in the country, he packed his bags and left without looking back. Law school was another battlefield. There were students who doubted him before he ever spoke, professors who looked past him. Some of the discrimination was subtle, a seat that was never offered, a conversation that ended when he joined. Other times, it was blatant. Affirmative. "Action," one student sneered when Malcolm outperformed him on an exam. "Must be nice." Malcolm had learned restraint young. He simply smiled, leaned forward. "Must be nice," he said, "to believe the only reason I'm better than you is because of a system designed to keep me out." He found allies, though. Students who saw beyond color. Professors who saw his brilliance. And then there was Jonas Freeman, an older black attorney who had spent years fighting an uphill battle in the courts. "The law isn't broken," Jonas told him one evening, as they walked past a protest demanding justice for yet another black man gunned down by police. "It was built this way. Your job isn't to fix it, your job is to rewrite it." So Malcolm did. He graduated at the top of his class, turned down lucrative private firm offers, and instead became a defense attorney, taking on the cases no one else would. Then came the offer. The city that raised him, scarred him, wanted him back. District attorney. The news rippled through the courthouse like a shockwave. Judges, attorneys, police officers, all the ones who had once dismissed him, whispered his name. And in the middle of it all, Judge Lawrence Whitmore, the man who had once thrown out Malcolm's case without a second glance, sat in his high-backed chair and watched. Malcolm saw the flicker of recognition in the judge's eyes, the slight widening of disbelief. And then, just as quickly, Whitmore's expression hardened. The battle lines were drawn. The resistance came, fast. Inside his own office, Malcolm found doubt and quiet hostility. Prosecutors avoided his gaze. Some outright challenged him. Others waited, watching, wondering if he would fail. Then came the files. Buried cases, convictions that should never have happened. Men sentenced under Whitmore's rulings with little evidence to support it. Malcolm set the files down with a slow exhale. He looked at the names, the faces, people just like his father. This stops now. Whitmore did not take the challenge lightly. First, it was quiet roadblocks, delayed requests, misplaced paperwork. Then, public undermining. The judge questioned Malcolm's experience, made subtle jabs in court. When Malcolm moved to reopen old cases, Whitmore dismissed him outright. Malcolm refused to yield. He fought back. But every step forward felt like a step deeper into a war that had no clear victory. The city felt it. Some hailed Malcolm as a beacon of change. Others, particularly those in power, saw him as a threat. A newspaper ran a feature calling him the man who could bring justice. The next day, Malcolm found a note on his car, scrawled in thick black ink. "You don't belong here." His mother saw the tension in his shoulders before he even spoke. "You're fighting ghosts, Malcolm," she said, her voice heavy with the exhaustion of someone who had seen too much, lost too much. "They've been running this city longer than we've been breathing," his brother Elijah sighed. "I get what you're trying to do, man. But these people, they don't play fair. You gotta be careful." Malcolm nodded. He knew the risks. Knew that every step he took further enraged the system that wanted him silent. But then a case landed on his desk. A black man sentenced to 25 years for a crime he didn't commit. The evidence had been fabricated. The judge who signed off on it? Lawrence Whitmore. Malcolm stared at the file, the weight of it settling deep in his chest. This was it. The case that could change everything, or destroy him. The case had been making waves long before the courtroom doors even opened. Malcolm Carter had seen controversy before, but this was different. This was bigger than a single case. This was a reckoning. The city was watching. The nation was watching. The case had exposed the intricate web of corruption that had kept black men locked away for decades. The police, the prosecutors, and the very judges who had sworn to uphold justice had instead conspired to suppress it. It wasn't just one mistake, one oversight. It was a system built to break men who looked like him. Malcolm sat in his office, stacks of files spread before him, the weight of it all pressing down on his shoulders. He read through the sentencing. Records again. Every name, every year stolen. His hands trembled slightly as he clicked open the leaked emails. The messages between Judge Whitmore and the police department were clear, damning. "We need another conviction on this one. He's a flight risk." "Understood. Standard sentencing? Make it 25 years. There it was. A signature. At the bottom. Whitmore's signature. Malcolm exhaled slowly. He wasn't just taking on a judge, he was taking on the system itself. The courtroom was filled to capacity. Lawyers, journalists, community leaders, skeptics, all waiting to see what would unfold. Judge Whitmore sat tall, his expression unreadable. He had weathered scandals before. He had dismissed protests, ignored accusations. He believed himself untouchable. Malcolm stood. His voice was steady, controlled, but beneath it there was fire. For years, this courtroom has been a place of power, a place where justice should have been served, but instead, it became a place where the powerful preyed on the powerless. Whitmore exhaled loudly, shaking his head. "Spare us the speech, Mr. Carter. If you have a case, present it." "Oh, I intend to." Malcolm turned to the jury. "Let's start with the numbers. Over a 10-year period, this court convicted black defendants at a rate 3 times higher than their white counterparts for similar crimes. The sentencing was consistently harsher, 20 years for possession, 30 for resisting arrest. Cases where the evidence was flimsy at best, non-existent at worst. "This is irrelevant," Whitmore interrupted. "A judge doesn't control the arrests. That is law enforcement's responsibility." "You're absolutely right, Your Honor." Malcolm took a step forward. "Which is why I took the liberty of retrieving your emails." The courtroom shifted, murmurs spreading through the crowd. Malcolm pulled out printed documents. These messages show direct coordination between this court and local police. Officers targeted black suspects, knowing they would receive harsh sentencing in your courtroom. You facilitated these convictions. You built your career off the backs of those you imprisoned. Whitmore leaned back, his jaw tightening. "This is baseless speculation." Malcolm turned. A man in a faded orange jumpsuit stood at the witness stand. His name was Terrence Lewis, sentenced to 25 years for a robbery that never happened. "Mr. Lewis, tell the court what happened the day you were arrested." Terrence cleared his throat, his voice hoarse from years of silence. "I was walking home from work. The cops pulled up, told me I matched a description. I told them I hadn't done nothing. They didn't care. I was booked, charged, and put before this judge. The public defender barely looked at me before telling me to take the plea." Malcolm held up a sheet of paper. "This is your arrest record. No evidence, no surveillance footage, no recovered stolen goods. And yet, 25 years. And here." Malcolm lifted the second sheet. is the email exchange between the arresting officer and Judge Whitmore. The judge's smirk wavered. "Still speculation," he muttered. Malcolm turned to the jury. "I'd like to introduce another witness." One by one, men stepped forward. Their stories were the same. Wrongful arrests, no evidence, decades stolen, the sigh. Courtroom was silent now. The weight of their words sank into the walls. Then Malcolm lifted one last document. "Your Honor, I saved the best for last." He walked toward the judge's bench, holding up a signed sentencing order. "This is your signature. Sentencing an innocent man to life. Will you deny it?" Whitmore's lips parted, but no words came. His hands trembled slightly, just enough for the jury to see. The silence stretched. Malcolm stepped closer. "Deny it, Your Honor." The room held its breath. Whitmore exhaled. His face, once so composed, was now pale. His fingers tightened around the gavel, but there was nowhere left to run. The murmurs turned to shouts. Some demanded his resignation. Others still defended him, clinging to the illusion that the system was just. Malcolm didn't celebrate. He knew this was only one battle in a war far from over. But today, justice had cracked the walls of the system, and the foundation was beginning to crumble. The gavel came down one last time. Judge Lawrence Whitmore's face, once hardened with arrogance, now seemed drained of color, his shoulders stiff as he listened to the official verdict. The accusations against him were irrefutable. His legacy, once built on power and control, now crumbled under the weight of undeniable proof. Some in the courtroom erupted in cheers, a long-awaited victory finally realized. Others whispered among themselves, warning of the consequences of bringing down a man so deeply rooted in the system. But Malcolm Carter did not celebrate. His hands remained at his sides, his expression unreadable. He knew this was not an ending, it was only a beginning. Outside the courthouse, the air buzzed with conversation. Journalists hounded him, microphones thrust toward his face. "Malcolm, what does this ruling mean for the justice system? Do you believe this will lead to greater reform? Do you fear retaliation?" He took a steady breath, glancing at the crowd. "This isn't about one man," he said. "This is about a system that has thrived on injustice. Today is a step, but we have miles to go. The threat started soon, after." Handwritten notes, crude messages scrawled on his office door. One morning, his assistant found an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sentence: "Step down before you destroy everything." He knew what they wanted, to scare him, to silence him. But the anger that simmered in his chest told him one thing: he had done something right. Inside his office, he sat in the dim light, his fingers pressed against his forehead. The walls around him were lined with legal texts, stacks of old case files still waiting for review. He had fought, he had won, but had anything really changed? The judge had fallen, but the system remained. New men in suits would take Whitmore's place. Would they be any different? Or was this just another cycle? A knock at the door broke the silence. Jonas Freeman stood at the entrance, arms crossed, his face calm but knowing. "Don't tell me you're already questioning if it was worth it." Malcolm let out a small chuckle, though there was no humor in it. "You ever feel like no matter what you do, it's not enough?" Jonas walked in, sitting across from him. "All the time," he admitted. "But this fight isn't about quick wins, Malcolm. Real change is a marathon, not a sprint." Malcolm exhaled. "And what if the system is too deep, too tangled? What if—" Jonas raised a hand. "Then you cut through it one thread at a time. You don't stop just because the first wall didn't come down easy." He leaned forward. "That's the job. You willing to do it?" Malcolm didn't answer. Right away. But he already knew. He hadn't been home in weeks. The streets felt smaller than he remembered, but the memories were still there. The sound of laughter from kids playing on the cracked sidewalks, the scent of home-cooked meals floating from windows. He stepped through the old gate, his fingers trailing across the wooden railing of the porch. Inside, everything was just as his mother had left it. The old photographs, the clock that never quite worked right. And outside, just past the fence, was the grave he had avoided for too long. He stood before the headstone, hands in his pockets. The wind was still, the world quiet. "You were right," he murmured. "Justice isn't something given. It's something fought for." His voice wavered, but he steadied himself. "I promise, I won't stop fighting." The city had changed since he left, and yet, in many ways, it hadn't changed at all. He saw it in the eyes of the people around him, some hopeful, some weary. He saw it in the faces of young men who reminded him of himself years ago, walking with purpose but carrying burdens they shouldn't have to bear. A young man stood outside the courthouse waiting. He was barely in his 20s, his suit slightly oversized, his hands gripping a folder. Too tightly. Malcolm recognized the nerves, the fire behind his eyes. "Mr. Carter?" the young man asked. Malcolm nodded. "What's your name?" "Jordan," the student replied. "I'm in my second year at law school. I've been following your case. I want to do what you do, but I don't know if I can." Malcolm studied him. He saw the hesitation, the quiet uncertainty that came before the leap. "What are you willing to do to change the world?" Malcolm asked. Jordan hesitated for only a moment before his grip on the folder tightened. "Whatever it takes," Malcolm smiled. "Then you're already on your way." The courthouse loomed behind him as he walked down the steps. The city still held its secrets, its struggles. But something was different. The headlines read of justice, of accountability, of a system being forced to reckon with itself. But Malcolm knew the real fight didn't happen in newspapers. It happened in courtrooms, in offices, in whispered conversations where decisions were made. He took a deep breath. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time the system was shaking.